Church, welcome to this edition of Checking In with Pastor Jim. Did you catch that? Good morning, church. I'm glad to see you this morning. It is Friday, June the 19th, 2020. And I need to begin by thanking Richard and Ruth Such for checking in with you yesterday. I watched just a few minutes of that. I love the way Ruth waited, until an audience was building up there. It's a good thing to do when you're not scheduled to go live. And then began to greet people as they came on one at a time. And then Richard was so funny. Good morning, church. Welcome to this edition of Checking In with Pastor Jim. Only it's not Pastor Jim. It's Richard and Ruth. Thank you so much, the two of you. If you're watching today, you were amazing, and I'm grateful to you. And thank you so much for accepting my check-in challenge. Who knows who's going to get the check-in challenge next Thursday? Today, as I said, June the 19th, it is a big day on the calendar. It's called Juneteenth. And if you don't know what that means, Juneteenth is a celebration of the liberation of slaves in Galveston, Texas, on that day, June 19th, 1865. 2,000 soldiers from the United States Army landed at Galveston, and it was General Granger who read a proclamation from the balcony of a downtown building saying, "All slaves are now free." And some of them didn't wait for the rest of the proclamation. They just ran rejoicing into the streets. Imagine what that was like. Put yourself in their shoes for just a moment. If you've been working as a slave in Galveston. I don't know what conditions were like, certainly better for some than others. But if you have been a slave and suddenly get the news that you are free, it would be a reason to rejoice. And so this day, June the 19th, has become a day of rejoicing, a celebration of liberation that continues unto this day. And I hope that somehow today you can celebrate Juneteenth. I wanted to bring you up to date just a little bit on where we are with heading back to church. Richard Such, as you know, is a member of that COVID-19 response team. And I believe that our plan, which has not been written in stone, but just the plan that we're working on, is to open the doors again and let people start coming back to church in the third phase of lifting restrictions across the state of Virginia. You know that we've been a little slower to do that in the city of Richmond, so I'm not sure when that day will come. But I think that's been our working plan, is once we get to phase 3, we'll open the door and start cautiously inviting people to return to worship in person, right? But that's going to be a few more days at least, maybe a few more weeks, and I've been wondering what you can do with the time that you have. Remember when all this started back in March and we were going to be kind of under quarantine, and some people were saying, "Oh no, I've been sent to my room for the next few weeks or months." We didn't know how long it would be. Others seized the opportunity. Let's use this as a good time to catch up on all the movies we haven't seen and read all the books we haven't read. I would say to you, whatever time is left, before we are able to get out and about fully, use it as a time to learn. There is so much to learn right now. Somebody was asking me the question last week, why do people want to bring down the monuments on Monument Avenue? Good question. Others are asking, why did that police officer kneel on that man's neck for so long? Good question. Some people are asking, why did someone spray paint the word "White Lives Matter" on the Arthur Ashe statue? Good question. Others are asking, why are so many people marching in the streets and chanting "Black Lives Matter"? Good question. When I was a boy, my mother would say that those kinds of questions, those why questions, were always good questions. She celebrated what she called intellectual curiosity. Intellectual curiosity is what drives you to find answers to the why question. So that when you're wondering, why is all this happening in our country right now? What's going on? It's a great question, but it should drive you to an education and not necessarily to an opinion. It's easy to have opinions, and opinions can be formed without benefit of education. You may never ask the question why. You may just say, well, here's how I feel. That feeling often comes from down here in your gut somewhere. But can you bring it up to your brain? Can you ask the question, why? And then look for some answers. In my own search for some answers, as I appeal to my intellectual curiosity, I watched a movie over these last few days that was made in 1915, now available on YouTube. And Larry West, I think you would like to know this, the full movie, a silent film from 1915, 3 hours and 15 minutes long, can be found on YouTube. It's called The Birth of a Nation. And I watched it because I wanted to know where some of our unease in this country comes from, some of our views about race. Where does that come from? This movie, made in 1915 by D.W. Griffith, was a masterpiece of propaganda. It was mostly about the hope that the North and South could be reunited in some meaningful way after the Civil War. But it glorifies the role of the Ku Klux Klan in putting down rebellion among the newly freed slaves. And there is a scene in which black people are rioting in the streets, and suddenly here comes the Ku Klux Klan riding into town. About 500 of them on horseback, dressed up in their white costumes with pointy hats. And because you've been caught up in this film, because you've sympathized with the characters, and some of the characters that you love are inside a house that is about to have its door broken down by black mobs on the street, you find yourself cheering for the Ku Klux Klan. I'm just telling you, I've never done that before, all right? And I didn't really do it when I was watching the film, but I could see how people would be led to do that because this is a dramatic film and they're caught up in the plot and feel sympathy for the characters. So I didn't learn until today that the Ku Klux Klan started in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865. I think I knew that. But it is interesting that, Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Grant on April the 9th, 1865. And then the 13th Amendment was ratified in December of 1865, which freed the slaves. All slaves everywhere, ratified by the states. And then also in December 1865, the Ku Klux Klan was formed in Pulaski, Tennessee. And I don't think it was a coincidence that the Klan was formed at the same time the slaves were freed. Somebody wanted to make sure that black people who were free still knew they were under the control of white people in this country. Anyway, I didn't know that Klan movement died out about 6 years later, 1871. And I didn't know that after this movie, Birth of a Nation, was released in 1915, there was a rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. And whereas before the members of the Klan had numbered in the hundreds, now they numbered in the thousands and the hundreds of thousands, some estimates as high as millions of people who were members of the Klan from 1950 until about the end of the 20s. So this film had this incredible impact on people. And it may be that some of your ancestors and some of my ancestors learned what they learned about race relations from a film called The Birth of a Nation. And if so, we need to reject that. We need to learn a different kind of history and look at things differently than maybe our parents and grandparents did. Well, all I'm saying is this time that we have would be a great time to learn, to use our intellectual curiosity to get to the bottom of some things and to find out why some people want to remove statues of Confederate generals, why some people are chanting that Black Lives Matter, why some people are resisting that, standing up for white lives. Let me just say, in your effort to learn, try to get a balanced view if you can. I would just say it this way. If you always watch Fox News to get your news, try listening to National Public Radio from time to time. If you always listen to National Public Radio, try watching Fox News from time to time. To understand, this would be my hope, is that we could come to understand each other better across those lines of division. And that understanding would lead to communication, and communication would lead to healing, and that there would be hope for our nation still. We do seem to be so divided these days. So let's dream about the birth of a nation that is truly united, where people know about each other, where they understand each other, where they care about each other. That's a vision of God's kingdom, isn't it? And maybe that's why at First Baptist Church, we are still trying to bring heaven to earth, to establish God's kingdom here in a place like Richmond, Virginia, just as it is in heaven, so that you could look around you at people who are different than you and feel love for them. Not hate, not repulsion, just love. And that because of your love, you could try to understand them better. I'm going to say one more thing. I realize I'm running on too long here, but in my own family, there have been divisions along political lines. And I remember hearing one brother who had not voted for Donald Trump asking another brother who had voted for Donald Trump, "Can you help me understand why?" And it was a beautiful, beautiful act of reaching out in an effort to understand. And when I heard my brother explaining his reasons, articulately, intelligently, and I heard my other brother asking questions and nodding his head, they were learning from each other. They were understanding. It was a beautiful thing to see. I would love it if in the family we call First Baptist Church, we could do that. That we would check our partisan politics at the door, because they can be very divisive. But that we would listen to each other and learn from each other, because, friends, we are not all the same at First Baptist. It's a big tent church. If you could put us all on one pew, as I have said before, you would have the full range of political opinion and theological understanding. But we can do this in the family. We can gather around the center pole of that big tent, and that's Jesus Christ. We can worship him, and we can learn from him. We can learn how to listen to each other and seek to understand each other, so that we really can love one another. That would be my hope as your pastor, all of you, with all the divisions that exist among you and us. My hope that we could truly learn to love one another. I've got to stop now. I've gone on too long, but there's something to think about today on Juneteenth. And let me end with a little bit of an old favorite that is played and sung on this day across the nation. A song my girls learned when they were going to D.C. public schools. And one that I heard my daughter Ellie singing to her newborn baby just the other night. It's sweet.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea.
Have a great day, friends. See you soon. I'll see you tomorrow if you'll tune in then.